Hi, I'm Bruce Meyer, and I want to welcome you to the Petersen Automotive Museum Global Garage Tour. And we're going all over the world and sharing people's passions. To some people, this may look like a collection, but I really don't like to think of myself as a collector. I like to think of myself as an enthusiast because I've been actively involved in the hobby for 60 years. I started from birth really loving cars, but I bought my first old car in 1964. I bought a 300 SL Gullwing. And from there, I have picked up cars, acquired cars over time ever since. So it's not like I had a mission of collecting Rolls Royces or English cars or German cars or motorcycles. It's just kind of happened organically, one at a time. So if you like, I'm happy to kind of walk you through it and hope you enjoy it. If I had to pick one car, it would probably be this black Cobra, a 1962 Shelby Cobra. And what makes this car special is that all Shelbys are known by what's called a CSX number, which is Carroll Shelby Export or Carroll Shelby Experimental, depends on who you talk to. But this is CSX 2001, which is the very first production Cobra. And I was able to acquire this car almost 20 years ago. I was fortunate enough to find this car in Paris, France at Retromobile, which is an annual get-together of dealers and enthusiasts and parts suppliers. And I found this car. It was painted Aston Martin green, but it was all here, original body, original engine in a crate. And it was sent to run Le Mans in the early 60s. And this would be 1962. And then probably the most famous car in the garage is this car here, which is a 1961 Ferrari short wheelbase Berlinetta. This car was third overall at Le Mans and first in class in 1961, which was the year Phil Hill won the World Championship. So 1961 was a very important year for Ferrari. And right next to it is a 1965 Bizzarini. And this car was also a veteran of Le Mans and also won its class at Le Mans. So this was a class winner, finished in the top 10, and is truly one of the most historic cars I have. Because this was really a one-man effort, he didn't have time to develop his own engine. So Bizzarini, even though he is the father of the Lamborghini engine, when he put this race effort together, he used one of his favorite engines, and that was the Chevrolet 327. So what makes this car so extraordinary is that the engine is placed so far back and so low. It's called a front mid-engine. And I think it's a very, very exotic, wonderful look. But you can see how low and how exciting that engine is with the side draft Webers. And it has a sound that is just fabulous. I have a real fascination with Le Mans. The 24 Hours of Le Mans is the World Cup, Super Bowl, Olympic Games of motorsport. And it's a very old and historic race. And one of the first serious winners of Le Mans were the Bentleys. And this is a 1929 Bentley, 4.5 liter, original bodied Van den Plas. And it's a rare car in that so many of these are replicated, but so many of them have replica bodies and replica bits. This is an all original car that I was able to find from long-term ownership in the UK. It's a 4.5 liter, 4-cylinder, very much like a train or a truck. They call these the fastest lorries, which would be the fastest trucks in the world. So this is what they won Le Mans with. This car has never turned a wheel on a racetrack, but it's turned a lot of wheels in touring. So we've done 3 North American Bentley tours with it. We've toured Europe in it, and we drive it around a lot. So this is a 1929 4.5 liter Bentley. One of my true passions, and the reason we're all here today is because of Robert E. Petersen and what he did for hot rodding and what he did for enthusiasts worldwide. And this is a 1932 Ford. I'm a big fan of the 32 Fords. Some people call them deuces, hence the 32. This is a contemporary build that was built really in the 80s and 90s, but it's an original Henry Ford body built by the best builders of its day, and it has a Ford engine in it, which so many of them have small block Chevys, but this one actually has a Ford. This is a GT40 Gurney Eagle engine in it, and this engine was provided by Dan Gurney. So this is an all-American effort and a very historic classic hot rod. Every car runs and we drive them, and at Pebble Beach we were on the tour, so just as the ribbon for completing the tour. So again, they're all drivers and we enjoy driving them and sharing them. The car behind me is called Sleeping Beauty, and it's a 1935 Bugatti Type 57, and it was found in a barn in France. And again, this is a car we drive. This is a photo of the car when it was discovered in a barn in France. And then we sent the car, after I bought it, to Scott Sargent in New Hampshire, and we went through and got it running beautifully. So this is a car I would have no hesitation driving it cross country. It's just a great car, and Bugatti built beautiful cars. And speaking of beautiful cars, this is the most beautiful car that I've ever had. This is a 1957 Ferrari Testarossa. It's a veteran of the displays at the Petersen, and it's by Ferrari's records the most winning Ferrari in history. And it didn't win Le Mans or the Tour de France or Targa Florio, but it won a lot of races at Pomona, Riverside, Santa Barbara, Mexico. It raced at Nassau, but it's got a huge race history. And it's also famous for me because it was originally bought by John von Neumann. And this is a picture of John von Neumann sitting in the car in 1957. And we had this car out just a week ago at the Cars and Coffees. So this car was driven by John von Neumann. His mechanic at the time was Richie Ginther. And then after John sold the car to Auto Zipper, it was driven by Ken Miles. And I think we all know Ken Miles from the GT40 Cobra fame. This is another car that probably is not new to the Petersen audience, but this is a new Ford GT. And the only difference is that it has no stripes and it's a bespoke color. It's a liquid silver, and it's the only one painted this. It's a 5-stage silver paint job. And again, we've driven it on the Petersen events to Santa Paula, and we drive it. The next few cars are meaningful in that the yellow car is the car I've had the longest. I bought that car. It's a 1967 Ferrari GTB 4Cam, and I bought the car in 1970, so it was just a little over 2 years old when I bought it from Bill Doheny. And Bill Doheny is a local enthusiast, very wealthy family. They have Greystone Mansion, and he bought this car brand new in '67, and I was able to buy it from him in 1970. And people kid with me because I was offered to trade it straight across for a GTO in 1971, and the GTO was advertised for sale for $8,500, and I had just paid $10,500 for this, so I figured, why would I go trade down, you know? So obviously the GTO is worth a little more today than that car, like as in a lot. And this car is a survivor. This is a all original Le Mans veteran. It's a 2008 C6R Corvette, and it was second at Le Mans in 08 and first at Le Mans in 09, and it won Sebring both in 08 and 09. Never been restored, still is with road rash and all the DNA of its drivers, Johnny O'Connell, David Garcia, and Jan Magnussen. And to give you an idea, I think this is an interesting photograph. If you come over here and maybe shoot in this direction, you can see the magnitude of Le Mans. To some of the younger enthusiasts, the name Clark Gable probably doesn't resonate like us old timers, but he was very important in the world of film. And in 1956, Mercedes did a promotion where they had Clark Gable right here, Gary Cooper, Errol Flynn, and Bing Crosby. And all of them drove this car. And in 1956, this car was $17,000, which was a huge amount of money for 1956. More expensive than a Gullwing, more expensive than a Ferrari or a Rolls-Royce. This is a 1960 Corvette, and this was the very first Corvette to run at Le Mans. So in 1960 was the very first year Corvette ever ran at Le Mans. So we have 1960, and we also have 2009. And this was campaigned by Briggs Cunningham, who was a famous American sportsman, won the America's Cup, very famous, on the cover of Time magazine. And this was his effort to win at Le Mans. They won their class and finished in the top 10 again. Many people think this is a German car because of the Duesenberg name. But the Duesenberg brothers, Fred and Augie Duesenberg, were race car builders. And so when E.L. Doheny decided he wanted to make the most famous, most powerful, and most extraordinary American car of all time, he hired the Duesenberg brothers. And what makes this car so special is this dual overhead cam, straight 8 engine, which back in the day, different than today, the engines were open and exposed, and they're pretty good looking. This car, they were all painted green with lots of aluminum and shiny stuff. So it's a purpose-built, high performance, twin overhead cam engine. I really consider myself a Porsche guy, kind of. And this car right here, this is a 1973 Porsche RS, and this was the car that kind of launched Porsche into racing. Because in order to race in the production class, they needed to build and homologate a group of production cars, and this was the car they used. This is an RS, 3.0 liter, and a very special car. It was not imported into the US, but they made enough of them. They made 500 of them to start with so they could classify it as a production car. So it started out as an RS, then it became an RSR, then it became a 934, and 934 and a half, and then this right here is the ultimate, quickest, most famous 911 in the world, really. So this is a 1979 Porsche 935 K3, and the K comes from Kremer, and Kremer was the kind of the performance arm, so to speak, of Porsche racing. It wasn't owned by Porsche, it was independent. Manfred and Erwin Kremer owned it. But they did a lot of R&D, and they did a lot of things in this car which was different than a standard 935, if there is such a thing. But they reversed the transmission to get a lower center of gravity. The intercoolers were air-to-air as opposed to water-cooled intercoolers. It's a very, very significant car, very well preserved, because when the owners went to prison, they donated the car, and it sat 30 years without being molested. So now we're entering an area that means a lot to me, and that's motorcycles and hot rods. I grew up in Los Angeles, grew up in Hollywood, went to all the drive-ins, dreamt about cruising in a hot rod, and it was something that my parents forbid. So what I did with motorcycles was without parental approval, and I had good jobs so I could afford motorcycles, and I bought them without my parents' permission, kept them in friends' garages, and had motorcycles right up to today. I raced motorcycles in the late 50s, early 60s, and then it just got way too professional, and I wasn't that good anyways, but I sure enjoyed the motorcycles. I dated my wife, Raylene, on motorcycles. We've been married 50 years, so it kind of took. She's a good pilot. We've done rallies all over the world together, whether it's in the Cobra or the hot rods, and she's a real enthusiast as well. And over here, this red car in the corner is kind of like my dream car. Growing up, reading Hot Rod magazine, Bonneville was a very big part of hot rodding. It started in the dry lakes, but then it moved to Bonneville. Still goes on in the dry lakes, but Bonneville's kind of the place. It's kind of the Indy 500 of what they call land speed racing. So I always wanted to go over 200 miles an hour in anything. So I went 200 in a fellow checkered flag member's car, his 85 Camaro, and that was Jack Rogers. I went 222 in his car, but I really wanted to have my own car, and I wanted to have an open car, a roadster, because this is like the way, this is the way it's done. So we built this car, and I was able to go over 200 in it, and it's, you know, about a little under 1,000 horsepower, weighs about 5,000 pounds. We actually had to weight it down, and the ride of my life. So driving a car like this, I say, is like driving a motorcycle flat out on a dirt road. It's not like going 200 on the highway. It moves around a lot, and you get up in the 200 range, it gets challenging. And it was a ride I will never, ever forget. They made a video on it, and it was just great fun. This dragster raced 241 races and lost only 4. So it won 237 races and only lost 4. And it was called the Greer, Black, and Prudhomme because Tom Greer was the kind of the moneyed partner, and Keith Black was very famous in my generation for building Hemi engines, and Don Prudhomme, I think we all know who Don is, and he was the guy that kind of put the whole package together, raced it, ran it, and set a world record in this car. There's 2 cars in here which I've not driven. One is the belly tank to speak of, and the other is this car because they won't let you run this car. I'm not sure I have the ability or the cojones to run it, but they won't let me, so I'll leave it at that. But we do take it out and start it up, and people love to hear it, what they call cackle. This is another interesting ride. This is a 1929, what they call a step hydroplane. And what makes this car special is the Miller engine. And Harry Miller had a shop right here in LA. And he built Indy cars and Grand Prix cars, and the Miller cars were the finest of the day. And he also built the engine that powers this hydroplane and won many championships. In fact, Sam Hanks, who won Indy 3 times, raced this boat in Biscayne Bay, Florida. That's the picture behind us. And I think we'll just kind of close this out with a little hot rod here. This is the Proofer Coupe. And to me, this just defines what a badass hot rod should look like. This was built by Tom Proofer, who was a drag racer. And if you just look at this car from the front, it just says it all. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our Grand Garage Tour. And I want to take this opportunity to again thank you for your support of the Petersen Automotive Museum. It's times like this when we need you the most, and you've been here for us. And I just want you to know from myself and the board of directors and the amazing, talented staff we have at the Petersen Automotive Museum, how much it means that you tune in and enjoy these exhibits outside the walls of the Petersen. So hope to see you soon. Thanks so much for being here. Enjoy.